up, friends? You guys all know that as you've started this journey of disciple making movements, that along the way, there's confirmations that you see where you're like, man, yeah, God is a part of this and this, and just doors opening. And man, we have so many in our area of we can see God at work. But one of the big ones is Jonathan and Joleene Burts. So early on in our journey, we got connected because Joleene, who's going to share her in a minute, read Chris's book, and he said, "Hey, one of my good friends who's part of this lives like 30 minutes from you." And we've become great friends with their family and partners with them. They've been doing disciple making movements longer than us. But man, it's been so cool just seeing as we work together what God's doing in our area. And Joleene has shared here a couple, I want to say like maybe 2 years ago. And I've had so many of you come to me and say, "Hey, I've watched that video that Joleene made a while back when she was on our call over and over again. When's she coming back?" And so, anyways, I finally followed through and excited to have Joleene share. She has just really neat updates of how she's applying disciple making movement principles in her neighborhood and in her city and in ways that I think would just be really, really empowering to you and to people on your teams. So I think that's all I've got to say. And so, hey, can we just give a eLife welcome to Joleene Burts? Press unmute. Joleene, you are on.
Hey, everybody. It's good to be here again. I recognize some people. It's fun to see. I love that the movement world is, everybody knows somebody somewhere. So it's good to see. I know Jordan Baker and I have been on a training together, and yeah, Tim Tremaine and a couple other people too. So it's really cool. Well, it's good to be here. I know Jim wanted me to come back and just share an update in our neighborhood. So Jim, is there any specific area that you wanted us to talk about this morning, or how much time and all that?
Yeah, you've got till about like maybe 12:40, 12:45 and our time. And no, you freedom to share a neighborhood, but also the different ministries that you've got involved in, garden stuff. And I know your story well. So yeah, feel free just to share what's happening.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the last time I was here with you all, it was like 2 years ago, and I had shared my journey. So if any of you haven't heard my journey, I won't share it again, but you can watch that video of how I got into DMM and the first discovery group that I had with some women, and 6 women in the neighborhood getting baptized, and starting groups with their families. And so it's been a beautiful journey. And one of the things that I'm currently learning and also growing in, well, 2 things, is one, learning to release people and to continue to mentor them from the outside and raise them up as leaders. So that group that I shared about last time I was on the call, they're continuing to meet as family in our neighborhood, several families together as church together. So they're even writing their own worship music from discovery. So they're not importing any worship music from, whatever worship band that you hear. They're actually, in the context of discovering God and who he is, the family, including the children, are writing down words of who God is, and they're compiling worship songs based on that. And then the mom is writing music for that. So it's so cool to see indigenous worship music coming from discovery. So that's a really cool thing that has happened with that group. And they're in our neighborhood, but they're not meeting in our home. So our disciple making community, which is actually our house church here, we're meeting regularly, but that discovery group that came from the harvest is meeting as church on their own, and we're connected to them. And they even come to some of our events, like Jim Burts and I are part of a San Diego DMM network here, and we get together. And so sometimes those Gen 1 groups come, and people come into our larger network, which is really encouraging because they can feel like, hey, I'm part of something bigger. There's other people around San Diego County that have discovery groups like we do. And so when we get together as a larger community and do, a DBS over Easter, we've done, they're like, hey, I know how to do this. This is what we do. So it's really exciting just to see what the Lord has done over the last couple years. So that's an update on the neighborhood. We're continuing to build relationships in our neighborhood, and but the Lord's really expanding our mission field and giving us just a vision for engaging in different spheres of society. So in our disciple making community, we have 6 families that have come from various church backgrounds and stuff, and we gather together weekly and worship together and hold each other accountable for engaging the lost each week. So within our disciple making community, we have a family that's focused on working in the prisons. So starting discovery groups and raising up leaders from the inside, existing Christians from the inside, to be the ones that take discovery Bible studies out through the local prison. So we have a guy that's really focused on that. We have a family that also is involved in ministering to women coming out of human trafficking. And so they've seen several discovery Bible studies happen within there. And a really cool, just recent story is one of the girls that was in one of those discovery groups a couple years ago. She would engage in the first couple questions, like, what are you thankful for? What's stressing you out? But when it came to actually reading the Bible and engaging with the Bible, she would shut down and not answer anything. And over time in this group, she was softening up. And of course, these women have so much trauma in their life. So the disciple maker, Shona is her name, who's part of our DMC. She's working with these women, and she's just patient. And so in these discovery groups, through this process, this woman has softened up, ended up really starting to engage with the Bible, applying it to her life, ended up giving her life to Jesus, and being baptized. We actually got to see her baptized in my parents' jacuzzi. She came and was part of our disciple making community celebration for that. And she actually had a baby recently, and she does not have a strong family at all. And it was actually sadly her parents that got her into human trafficking, which is so heartbreaking. But through this process, Shona and her husband, Dean, have adopted her. So our and she's now part of our disciple making community as church family. And so they adopted her. She's 30. They adopted her and her baby. His name's Charlie. And so it's just a sweet picture of faithfulness, investing in relationship over time, and seeing not only her coming to know Jesus, but they are impacting generations because of their love for this girl. And it was through the discovery process that she came to know, but it wasn't fast. It took a long, long time of really pouring into her. And now this gal is on fire for wanting to start discovery groups with other young moms in the area. So that's just a sweet, sweet story. And there's another group, and actually some people that Jim's connected to with, and he might have even shared it on this call, the A team that my husband is working among. And these are young men, some high school, some college, that are from some rough backgrounds, but really, really hungry for male leadership in their life. And so they have so many young men that are either spiritually hungry, or are brand new believers, or are seeking truth and open to discovery groups. So my husband's helping launch discovery groups within that team as well. And so it's really, really neat how it's kind of started with our own neighborhood, and now we're branching out into other areas. And I volunteer at a crisis pregnancy clinic, a pro-life crisis pregnancy clinic. It's actually a medical clinic and also has a resource center. So I go every week and volunteer my time to just invest in women who are finding themselves in crisis pregnancies and needing to know how can they carry this baby to term, have a baby, and either raise this child or give this child up for adoption, but to champion life. And so my role as a client advocate is to provide them resources of like parenting classes, resources about marriage and family life, and even how to find a job, other resources in the community where they can get some financial help or food banks and things like that. So I'm a resource there, but I'm also finding a common thread with all these women that come in. The first common thread is none of them are open to wanting to walk into a church to find the answers to their spiritual needs. They have various reasons for that. A lot of it is covered in shame. A lot of it is past wounds and hurts or misunderstandings or whatever. So they do not want to go to church. And this crisis pregnancy clinic that I started volunteering at, I've been there about almost 3 years now. Their way that they used to do things is they used to just give these women a church list and say, hey, if you want to know God or whatever, we can share some resources with you here, but then here's a list of churches that you can go to. So they kind of just outsource, they think, disciple making happens within the four walls of church only. So that's where you go. So that was their typical route of doing it. But since I've been there, I've been showing the clinic that, hey, these women are not wanting to walk into a church. Now that's heartbreaking, but we need to have other ways of reaching them. So all these women that have said no to walking into a church, I would like to say surprisingly, but it's not really that surprising. Every single one of them wants to read the Bible. They're open to reading the Bible and sharing that with their friends or family or whoever they're in community with. And it's been a really neat, long process, I feel like, of actually me not just working with these women, but working with this pregnancy clinic to show them, hey, there are other ways to reach these women and to disciple them where they're at without having to force them to go to a church to do that. And so I feel like my role there is twofold, is not only to work with these women, but also to help the staff at the pregnancy clinic see another way and of discovery and being able to allow these women to take the discovery process to their families, and then see transformation, not only in them, but in their families and in their friends' sphere of influence and all that. So that's been a really neat thing that I've been spending a lot of my time in. And that is actually a prayer request. You guys can be praying for that, because I live in California. And so there's a lot of fear within this crisis pregnancy clinic of being shut down. It is a religious nonprofit, so we are allowed to share the Bible and do those kinds of things within the clinic, but there's a lot of restrictions. So one of the restrictions on me is that I'm not allowed to have like a relationship with these women outside of the clinic. So I'm only there once a week for 3 hours. So it's really hard to mentor and to kind of coach them in the discovery process throughout the week because I have that limitation. And so it's a big prayer request. It's frustrating at times, but I really feel like the Lord's doing a work there. So yeah, so there are so many other things other than our neighborhood that God's leading us into. And he's also teaching, showing us one of the biggest struggles we've had. So I've been doing DMM since 2017. And started getting coached by Paul Watson back then, and also have a close relationship with David Watson as well. And we've been learning, one of the struggles has been getting groups, discovery groups. So I'll find a person, and build a relationship with a person and share, and that person would be open, but then getting them to either share it with their family or form a group. that's been the biggest challenge. And not only just to form the group, but to see that group sustain in a DBS has been just a challenge. I think it's a challenge. Most people I talk to, that's the biggest challenge, is to see groups, sustained groups. And we know that discovery Bible studies are best done in a group. They're more likely to multiply. They're more likely to stand against persecution and all that kind of stuff. So one of the things that we're trying to do better at, I would say, is in our engagement, as we're engaging with unbelievers, to try to do that in the context of their oikos. So for example, when we meet someone, instead of just jumping straight into like spiritual discovery conversations with them right away, try to try to see if they would invite us into their oikos. Kind of like when we read in Matthew 10 and Luke 10, where you go to the house, and when you find that man, that worthy man or that person of peace, stay with them and eat with them. So the idea of like trying to engage with families or groups of people and have those casual, meaningful, spiritual discovery conversations in that context. And so we're hoping, we're trying that, and it's not a new concept. It's something that we had heard about from a long time ago, but it's, we're realizing we put too much emphasis on this, like working with one person and not like eating and drinking and fellowshipping with their oikos. So we're hoping that will increase the probability of once a discovery, like even discovery conversations happen, if they're happening in the context of a group, that naturally would be like, hey, would you want to, read a story together? And then when you're doing that, you're doing it with a group. So that's one of the big things that we're trying to grow in right now. Yeah, so I could talk about a lot of other things, but maybe that has already raised some questions for people or conversations.
That's great, Jolene. Yeah, I didn't say at the beginning, we do lots of questions. And I have one for you actually that I think would be really helpful people to hear is, hey, your transition from being a part of a legacy church to then going, hey, we're going to do church just all in, at our house. Hey, walk us through what that looked like. Why did you make that decision? I think that would help a lot of people here.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So last time I shared, I was actually part of a legacy church, and we were doing, we as in my husband and I were doing DMM on our own for a while. And I think all of us can understand, like when you first learn about it and the concepts, like our initial reaction is like, oh my goodness, I need to tell my pastor all about this and get my pastor on board. And that was not fruitful. It was actually very discouraging. But we kept going. And actually, as we were sharing stories with people just in general in the congregation, other people were like, well, I want to learn what you do. So we were forming our disciple making community, not just from other people in our church, but from other churches in the area, people that were kind of discontent with what was going on and knowing that there's something more that they want to do. And so and we held a few trainings in our house as well over the years. And so we had our disciple making community of people that were doing DMM together, but then we also were part of our legacy church. And we led like a small group, traditional small group in our legacy church, which was like the sermon notes and the sermon questions. And we really felt like we wanted to try to take what we were learning from our disciple making community and DMM and try to implement some of those principles like in micro shifts and like little ways into our small group at our legacy church, because we were seeing people were talking about the sermon and discussing, and everybody was really great about discussing insights and everything, but there was no obedience. There was no action to put sermon. And a lot of times people didn't even remember what the sermon was the week before. So it was just going in one ear and out the other. And so we really were trying to, hey, what can so we were implementing things like, okay, based on what we learned in the sermon, what's something that you can do specifically this week to obey? And boy, we got pushback. Like obedience, that is works related, and that is so it was so, and one of the guys in our small group was one of the elders of the church. So anyway, we it was very frustrating, but we were like, listen, Jesus says, if you love me, you will obey my commands. And obedience is an overflow of love. It's not works. We're not saying you're going to be saved by this. We're saying you're already saved. Therefore, God's prepared works in advance for you to walk in. So this is very biblical to like obey God. So some people would do it, but then when it would come the next week and we would follow up and say, how did it go? And nobody did their obedience statements. And so that there was a little bit of like frustration there at first. And then also to encourage people, hey, we want to be going out and spending time with unbelievers because we're disciples and we're supposed to make disciples and we're supposed to engage the lost. And so there was, a lot like people had the heart to want to do that, but they didn't want to make it a priority because our church actually had so many other programs. They had a women's ministry and they had a VBS and they had all these things, and everybody was so busy. They didn't have any time to be with lost people. So those two things, we gave it a couple years of just being patient because we know it's hard. It's not like something you can just do right away. Just let's be patient. Let's keep encouraging, keep pushing. So at the same time, we've got our DMC over here, and everyone in the DMC is passionate. They're like, yes, we're going out among the lost together. We're obeying, and we need to hold each other accountable. And so it was just this very night and day, two different groups. And it was also difficult because our time is spread thin here. So we've got this group over here, and then we've got our legacy church group over here, and we're constantly frustrated. And then over here, we're always encouraged. And this group ended up really feeling like our family. And the people that knew us and knew our heart, and we had the same vision and mission. And then over here was like these people, we love them. They love the Lord. It's just they're not ready. They're not, and plus it wasn't being encouraged from the church leadership. And all they knew was we just do what our pastor tells us to do. So we didn't have that, I don't know, in their minds, like the authority to tell them we can change the questions and we can tell them to hang out with lost people. Is like, it needs to come from the pastor. So if the pastor's not saying it, then we don't need to do it. So it was just this real frustration. And honestly, one day at church, I was listening to a sermon. The pastor was giving a sermon about, we need to be disciples that make disciples. And he was saying all this stuff. And I'm like, yes, what you're saying is right, but you got to do it. And I can help, but you don't want help. So anyway, we were at that place, and through many, many other circumstances, and also what the Lord was speaking to all the other people in our disciple making community, it became really clear that the Lord was saying, hey, I actually want you to trust me with this legacy church. I'm going to do a work in my own timing, but this really is your church. Your disciple making community really is your church, and you're not investing in them well, like you could be, because you're split, you're divided. And so we had a lot of prayer, fasting. My husband and I, we talked to several other, and actually there were other church leaders in the area of legacy churches that were part of our disciple making community network and stuff, that were really encouraging. So we're like, how is it that all these churches, other churches, like really want to run with this, but our church over here, legacy church, doesn't? So yeah, so there was a point when we just said, my husband kind of got a word from the Lord through just a story that he was reading, actually in one of the Chronicles of Narnia, and where Lucy was, I don't know if you guys have read the Narnia stories, but I can't remember which, I don't know if it's Prince Caspian or which story it was, but Lucy's following Aslan and nobody believes her. everyone's like, you're not following Aslan, and she's like, we gotta sleep out here. And everybody was sleeping and camping in the dark. And Lucy's like, I see Aslan, you guys, we gotta come. And they're like, no, we don't want to follow you. You don't see anything. And so finally she said, well, I just gotta go. I've just gotta go follow Aslan. So she left her people sleeping in the campground and went and followed Aslan, and she saw Aslan. So my husband, that story came to his mind one day, and he said, Joleene, I think we're following Aslan, and I think we need to let go and just follow Aslan. So it's time for us to make our disciple making community. That's going to be our main spiritual community. It already is. But we just started incorporating a little bit more into our disciple making community, like worship and communion and things like that. And so now we have a disciple making community that is our church. We meet on Sundays for 3 hours. We have a meal together for the first hour and share celebration stories of what the Lord's doing. The second hour we worship, and actually it's very unstructured worship. It's just as the Holy Spirit leads and gives a word of encouragement or gives a scripture, we read it, and the Lord will give a song, and someone will stand up and go play the piano and play a song, and then that'll make somebody think of, oh, we need to pray for healing for this person. So we pray. So we have an hour of just wherever the Lord wants to take us. And we ask our group to prepare in advance if there's something in your devotional time that God's put on your heart, or a story you want to share, or a song you want to bring and print out, the words to it, or whatever. So people come to that worship time with something to bring. So we have that for an hour. And then the last hour of our church, house church, we do discovery Bible study together. So that's how we're gathering. And it's such a blessing. And Shona and Dean Broyles with their new adopted daughter is part of it as well. We've got 6 families, and it's such a beautiful time. And we feel like we have so much more time now and so much more focus. And we're still in connection with a lot of people at the legacy church that we left, but so no hard feelings. We just know that God's the one that prepares the hearts, and you can't make anybody do something they're not ready for. But I believe they'll be ready someday, especially with the way our nation is going. Like, yeah, God's going to make people ready. But that's not our job. We just need to keep following Aslan, keep following Jesus, and do what he calls us to do. And he'll make our way clear where we're supposed to go. So yes,
That's
our
awesome,
journey.
Jolene. No, thank you for sharing that. I think that's empowering for all of us. Any other questions anyone has, or comments based on things that Jolene shared? And if not, that's cool. We're going to go to groups and pray for Jolene. But
I have
go
one.
ahead. Yeah.
So when you talked last time, Jolene, you talked a little bit about your kids and their involvement and what they were doing with school. Can you kind of update? I think of that so often. Can you kind of update us on how your kids are doing with? Are they part of the DMC? Do they do your DBS with you? How are they doing with their own, outreach?
Yes. Oh, good. I'm glad you asked. Yes. So our kids have always been involved in everything that we do, from prayer meetings to discovery groups with families. And yeah, in our DMC, they're actively involved. So we actually rotate, who facilitates different things each week. So they are in the rotation. So they'll lead discovery Bible studies, they'll lead communion, they'll come and play a worship song or whatever. And they have done discovery groups with other neighbor families. And actually my daughter, we were hanging out with one gal who's her age. So my daughter's 13. We went to the beach with a neighbor friend who's also 13 recently. And in the car, the neighbor friend started asking really, what's the word? Basically questions about gender and LGBTQ stuff, and things that she was hearing in school and things that she was reading on social media. And my kids are homeschooled, and they don't even have phones or do any kind of social media or anything. So, but we talk about this kind of stuff. So it's not like anything they haven't heard. But this gal started asking questions like, can you follow God, but also be gay? Or I hear people online saying this, and what's true? So really great questions. And I know her parents really well. Actually, her parents have gone through the discovery process too. So this gal was asking these questions. And so my daughter, Brielle, was, talking about it. And we ended up answering her questions, not from just our own opinions about things, but we played for her because we were in the car. So we played Romans chapter 1 for her. So, because a lot of her questions are answered in that. So we just said, hey, we'll play for you this, and you let us know what you think it said, what God thinks about certain things. So we played that, and she shared, she said, it makes a lot of sense. It's very, very, very clear that God created man and woman, and that women exchanging their natural relations for unnatural ones is not what God wants. So then she started asking more questions and more questions. And she said, I think my friends that are asking me these questions and discussing these things with me online, I think they would want to read the Bible. So my daughter, and it would be under my supervision. So my daughter is going to lead a Discovery Bible study in the school year with this neighbor gal and her friends that have all these questions. So it's really neat to see just how even kids can learn the principle of, hey, we don't have to have all the answers. God has the answers in his word. And so that's the best place to answer anybody's question. And then they're not arguing with us. They're dealing with God and what he says. And so what a great way to engage our culture today, because everything's so hostile, right? In conversations. And if we could just say, hey, God, we just trust that your word and your spirit can do all that heavy lifting, and we don't have to be in constant battle verbally with people. We can just lead them to your word, and your spirit will convict them and show them what's true. So I'm teaching my daughter how to do that. And that's really cool. So yeah, my daughter's 13 and my son is 11, and they are very involved with disciple making lifestyle. And they come to all the potlucks that I go to with Jim, and they hang out with Jim's kids, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Thanks.
Hey, we got time
Thanks
for one more.
Jim, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Hey, Joleene, thank you so much. One of the biggest questions I get from people that are kind of stuck on going from legacy to, a disciple making community or a simple church is about the kids. And so you mentioned, I think on your Sunday gatherings so I'm assuming they be with you for the meal together. And then the second part, the unstructured worship time that people come prepared for. Maybe sometimes they're on their own, sometimes they're together. If you could mention that. And then during the DBS focus, you did mention that some people are assigned different tasks each week. So would they be kind of overseeing the kids during that time, or?
We've always had them involved. We've never separated kids off. So when they were really young, and actually when they were really young, we had a couple other families that were part of our group too, with young kids. We just, and you don't have to, I think it's cultural and whatever works for the families. I don't think there's like a right way or wrong way, but I think we underestimate what kids can do. Actually, the kids have always been way better at retelling the stories than the adults, because it's just that part of the development of their brain. They can memorize things really well and retell. It's actually part of like how we homeschool our kids, is a lot of memorization kind of when they're young. So yeah, we just have the kids participate in the Discovery Bible study. Even in the worship time, they participate at all of it. We've never had a separate, like, put the kids over here and somebody watch them. Not to say you can't, but we've never felt like we needed to. It doesn't mean it's not. I mean, we have a baby. Actually, the gal who was adopted and she has a baby, he's now learning to walk, and so we're in a circle and he's in the middle, and he's like grabbing things and grabbing people's toes, and it's a little bit of a distraction, but it's okay. and it works. And so anybody just grabs him up and holds him. Sometimes people are walking around with him. And I remember when our kids were little and they were doing DBS, sometimes we'd have them do a coloring sheet of a picture of whatever the story was, and they'll just color the picture. And you think that they're not really listening, but they totally are, because they can answer the questions later. So that's how we've done it. And it's worked fine having the kids there, but we've never had like a ton and a lot of young kids. So I can understand if you have a lot of young kids and it's super distracting, then you could pull them aside. But I think, yeah, if we want this to be reproducible for other people to do with their families, we can't make it too hard. We have to be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable with kiddos, because that's how they're going to learn about it. Yeah.
One of our values in our church is, we tell people up front, is the salvation of the next generation is worth the noise and mess. And there's times where the kids are just getting crazy, and someone just says that out loud with a smile, and we go, okay, you're right. And so yeah, we just go, hey, and when new people come and they start getting embarrassed that their kids are crazy, we remind them of that value, and they go, oh, you really mean that? That's great. So that's cool. Joleene, this is awesome. Thank you so much.
Where's the
So
video, Jim?
What's that?
Where's the video?
Of the last time she spoke?
Yes.
Chris, go on us. What's the answer to that question?
Yeah, it's on YouTube, Johnny. So we can post another link to it, and it's also on our blog and on YouTube.
Please. Thank you.